Evelyn Hart, CEO of a global empire, saw people as numbers, assets, or liabilities, nothing more. Emotions were inefficiency, distractions she couldn't afford. But that Tuesday, in the sterile chaos of St. Jude's Hospital, a frantic father ran past her luxury car, screaming for help. Irritated at first, she followed, more curious than compassionate. What she saw next wasn't just desperation. It was a truth that would shatter her entire world. His daughter wasn't just sick. She held the power to make Evelyn question everything she had ever valued, every decision she had ever made. Evelyn Hart didn't build Hartwell Enterprises. She inherited a foundation and erected a skyscraper. What was once her father's respectable, handshake-driven real estate firm was now a sprawling, multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that consumed rivals for breakfast. Her father, a man she remembered with a frustrating mix of love and pity, built his company on relationships and gut feelings. Evelyn built hers on data, predictive algorithms, and a ruthlessness that had become a cautionary tale on Wall Street. She saw the world as a complex system to be optimized, and sentiment, feelings, empathy, these were just friction, inefficient variables gumming up the gears of progress. Her latest and most controversial acquisition was a portfolio of distressed city hospitals, including the slightly run-down St. Jude's General. To her investors, it was a brilliant, recession-proof power play. To Evelyn, it was a simple exercise in ruthless efficiency. She didn't see doctors and nurses. She saw personnel costs, shift patterns to be optimized, and redundant roles to be eliminated. She didn't see patients. She saw occupied beds, billing codes, and revenue streams. Human suffering was an unfortunate but unavoidable data point in the business of healthcare. On this particular Tuesday, Evelyn was storming out of St. Jude's after a grueling 6-hour audit. The place was a financial black hole, bleeding money at a rate that offended her sensibilities. Her mind, a finely tuned machine of profit and loss, was already drafting the next phase of her takeover. Phase 1, executed 3 months prior, had been a sweeping wave of layoffs that stripped the hospital of what she deemed non-essential personnel. As her driver, a stoic man named Arthur, held the door to her obsidian black Maybach, she made a decision. Phase 2 would have to cut to the bone, automate scheduling, consolidate the labs with a facility across town, and, most critically, increase the nurse-to-patient ratio. The hospital had to be leaner, stronger, profitable. It was sick, and she believed her cold, unfeeling logic was the only cure. She slid onto the buttery leather of the back seat, the door closing with a silent, satisfying thud that sealed her off from the world. She was lost in thought about amortization schedules and capital expenditure reports when the scream of tires ripped through the insulated quiet of her car. It was a messy, inefficient sound that offended her on a primal level. It was a sound of chaos, of things not going according to plan. The world she'd built for herself was silent, controlled, and predictable. This was an intrusion, a vulgar disruption of her perfectly ordered universe. A beat-up, rusty sedan, a model she couldn't even name, its fender a patchwork of primer and rust, had screeched to a halt, boxing in her Maybach. A man stumbled out, tall but stooped, with a bone-deep exhaustion. His frayed work shirt was flecked with what looked like sawdust, and his worn jeans were stained with paint. In his arms, he clutched a small child wrapped in a thin, gray blanket, a tiny, still form against his heaving chest. "Help! Somebody! Please! Help my daughter!" he screamed, his voice raw with a terror so thick it seemed to hang in the humid afternoon air, vibrating with a desperate, animalistic urgency. Evelyn felt a flash of pure, unadulterated annoyance. He was making a scene, a public and unseemly display. He was disrupting the orderly flow of hospital operations. Her first instinct, the CEO instinct, was to tap the glass partition. "Arthur, go around. Get me out of here." But she didn't. Her hand hovered, frozen in the space between action and inaction. Instead, an impulse she couldn't name, a flicker of something totally alien and unwelcome, made her watch. She saw the man, Daniel, sprint toward the emergency room doors, his movements clumsy with panic. Her inner CEO was already cataloging his failures. No private car service, no call ahead to the patient liaison. Shouting won't get his child treated any faster. It's counterproductive. He's causing a bottleneck. Arthur, her driver of 10 years, cleared his throat. He'd seen her dismiss world leaders with more warmth than she was showing this scene. "Miss Hart, I can find a way around." "Wait here," she said. the words surprising even herself. They felt foreign in her own mouth. Driven by an irritation that was rapidly morphing into a strange, analytical curiosity, she stepped out of the car. The city heat hit her, but she barely noticed. She followed him inside. Her expensive heels, a symbol of her power and precision, clicked sharply on the polished linoleum floor. The sound was a stark, clinical rhythm against the man's frantic, stumbling run and the ragged gasps of his breathing. She wasn't there to help. She told herself she was an observer, a CEO inspecting a critical failure in one of her underperforming assets. She was there to diagnose a problem, and this chaotic, desperate man was the primary symptom. She had no clue that the real diagnosis she was about to receive would be her own. The emergency room was a symphony of controlled chaos, smelling of antiseptic, stale coffee, and a sharp, metallic tang of anxiety. Evelyn, accustomed to the hushed, minimalist halls of her corporate headquarters, felt as if she'd landed on another planet. The air was thick with coughing, quiet weeping, and the incessant, maddening beeps of machinery. She kept her distance, a silent, statuesque figure in a bespoke power suit, blending into the shadows near a vending machine as if she were merely inspecting the facilities for cleanliness. From her vantage point, she watched Daniel plead with the triage nurse. The nurse, whose name tag read Maria, had dark circles under her eyes and a pen tucked into a messy bun. She was clearly overwhelmed, yet her voice was steady as she tried to manage the desperate father. "Lily, my daughter. She can't breathe. The fever just shot up. I was at my second job. Came home and she was..." His voice broke, shattering into a sob he tried to stifle. He hugged the small, still bundle in his arms even tighter, as if his embrace alone could ward off the unseen enemy attacking her. Evelyn's analytical mind began processing the inputs. Worn clothes suggested a low-income bracket. A second job implied financial strain. The absence of a ring and no mention of a wife pointed to him being a single parent. This man was barely hanging on by a thread. She then turned her critical eye to the hospital itself. The nurse looked exhausted. The waiting room was overflowing with patients, a direct and predictable result of the Phase 1 budget cuts she had personally championed and approved 3 months ago. For a split second, the line item flashed in her mind as if projected on the wall. Personnel reduction, emergency services, 15%. She pushed the thought away with practiced ease. Tough decisions were necessary for fiscal health. This was the unfortunate but statistically acceptable consequence. A doctor finally rushed Daniel and his daughter Lily into an examination bay. The curtain was pulled, but not completely, leaving a tantalizing gap. Against her better judgment, against every instinct that told her to leave, Evelyn drifted closer, drawn by an invisible thread. She strained to hear the urgent, hushed voices from within. "Lungs are filling rapidly. This looks like severe acute pneumonia. O2 saturation is dropping fast. It's at 85%. Her heart rate is thready, tachycardic. We need to be aggressive. Start broad-spectrum antibiotics and get respiratory down here now. We might have to intubate." Then another voice, sharper and filled with an urgency that cut through the noise. "Look at this inflammation pattern. Given her rapid decline, we need our strongest option. We don't have time to wait. Start a course of Pulmoclear immediately." The name hit Evelyn like a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. Pulmoclear. It wasn't just any drug, it was her drug, her triumph. 6 months earlier, Hartwell Enterprises had acquired a small, innovative biotech firm on the verge of bankruptcy. Their crown jewel, the sole reason for the acquisition, was a revolutionary new antibiotic. Pulmoclear. It was a miracle for severe, drug-resistant respiratory infections, a potential goldmine that would dominate the market. She remembered the boardroom meeting as if it were yesterday. The mahogany table gleamed under the recessed lighting. Her finance team, led by her sycophantic CFO, presented the pricing models on a massive screen. He pointed to the most aggressive option. "This model maximizes shareholder value, Evelyn. It's bold, but defensible in the current market." A junior analyst, a young man whose name she'd already forgotten, had nervously cleared his throat. "Ms. Hart, forgive me, but the public response... Patient advocacy groups will argue this price puts it out of reach for..." Evelyn had silenced him with a single, icy stare. "We are not a charity," she'd announced to the silent room, her voice leaving no room for debate. "We are selling a premium life-saving intervention. The price will reflect that value." She personally signed the order to quadruple the proposed price. The board loved it. Profits soared. The backlash from patient groups was loud but ultimately dismissed as predictable, sentimental noise. But now, that noise had a face. It had a name. It was Lily. And the noise had a voice. It was the sound of the nurse, Maria, speaking quietly to a broken father just on the other side of the thin curtain. "Sir," the nurse said gently, her voice full of a pity that sounded unprofessional to Evelyn's ears. "I have the cost information for the pulmo clear. Your insurance doesn't cover it. The out-of-pocket cost for the full course of treatment will be $28,450. Evelyn didn't need to hear the number. She knew it to the last dollar. She had said it. It was a figure designed for insurance companies and hospital networks to negotiate, not for a carpenter working 2 jobs. She saw Daniel physically flinch through the gap, his shoulders slumping as if he'd been struck by a physical force. The last bit of fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a hollow, soul-crushing despair that was terrifying to witness. He leaned against the wall, his hand covering his mouth, a silent, ragged sound escaping his throat. In that one, brutal instant, Evelyn Hart's meticulously ordered world fractured, then imploded. The beeping monitors, the distant overhead announcements, it all faded into a deafening, roaring silence. All she could see was the father's devastated profile through the gap in the curtain. A number on her spreadsheet, a decision that had boosted quarterly profits by 18%, had just become a brutal, insurmountable wall that she had built, brick by merciless brick, standing between a terrified father and his dying child. The cold certainty that had defined her entire life, her entire identity, curdled into something that felt like poison spreading through her veins. For the first time, Evelyn understood the true cost of her success. She was the architect of this man's agony. Hiding in the shadows suddenly felt pathetic and cowardly. For the first time in her adult life, Evelyn Hart acted without thinking, without calculation. She found herself walking toward the sound of defeat. Daniel was at the nursing station, his conversation with a harried hospital administrator a quiet murmur of finality. He wasn't pleading anymore. He was just absorbing the blow, his face a mask of numb resignation. Evelyn stopped beside them. The administrator, a man named Mr. Davies, recognized the powerful CEO of the company that owned his hospital and snapped to attention, his face a mixture of fear and confusion. "Miss Hart? What an honor! Is everything to your satisfaction?" But Evelyn's eyes were locked on Daniel. "Give the girl the drug," she said, her voice a quiet command that cut through the ER noise. "Charge it to me." Daniel turned, his eyes hollow and red-rimmed. He stared at her, this woman in a suit that cost more than his car, making impossible promises. "What?" he whispered. "Ms. Hart, I don't understand. There are procedures, billing codes," the administrator stammered, wringing his hands. "Bypass them," Evelyn said, a flicker of her old, formidable authority returning, but this time wielded for a different purpose. She pulled out her phone and made a single, brief call to her COO. "Marcus, it's Evelyn. I'm at St. Jude's, a pediatric patient, Lily. She needs pulmo clear and a PICU bed, stat. No billing, no insurance checks. Put it on my personal account. Don't ask questions, just make it happen." She hung up. "Solve it," was all she said to the stunned administrator. Within minutes, the bureaucratic paralysis vanished as if it had never existed. The pulmo clear appeared. The hospital's top pediatric specialist was suddenly on his way in from home. Orders were given to move Lily to the best private room in the pediatric ICU. As Mr. Davies scurried away to carry out his new orders, Daniel was left alone with his strange, powerful benefactor. "Why?" he finally managed to ask, his voice thick with suspicion and confusion. "Who are you?" Evelyn looked at him, at the raw pain and desperate love etched onto his face, and for the first time, she didn't have a calculated answer. The full truth felt too monstrous to speak aloud. "I'm the woman who almost let your daughter die for a profit margin." So she offered a smaller, simpler truth that was just beginning to grow inside her, fragile but real. "No parent," she said, her voice thick with an unfamiliar emotion that tightened her throat. "No parent should ever have to choose between their child and money." Later that night, as they sat in the sterile quiet of the PICU waiting room under the harsh fluorescent lights, they talked. He told her about being a carpenter, about the satisfaction of working with wood. He told her about his second job, taking night shifts as a janitor in an office building downtown. He told her about his wife, Sarah, who he'd lost to a vicious and swift battle with cancer 3 years ago, leaving him with their bright-eyed 6-year-old Lily. He talked about his daughter's love for drawing and the color yellow, and how her laugh could fill their tiny 2-bedroom apartment with more light than the sun. Evelyn just listened. Each word, each painful memory, each expression of love chipped away at the icy fortress she had spent a lifetime building around her heart. She wasn't a CEO anymore, sitting there on that uncomfortable vinyl chair. She was just a woman, face to face with a depth of humanity so powerful it made her own life of insulated wealth and calculated victories feel utterly, profoundly empty. Evelyn kept coming back. She canceled a trip to Tokyo and a meeting with her European board. The hospital, once just an asset on a balance sheet, became a sanctuary of sorts. She shed a piece of her corporate armor with each visit. She brought coffee, sitting in silence with Daniel for hours. She even peeked into Lily's room once she was awake and off the ventilator, watching from the doorway as she used a box of new crayons to draw a wobbly but brilliant yellow sun. The miracle drug was working, the miracle she had almost withheld. The truth came out, as it often does, from the flickering screen of a waiting room TV. A business news report flashed a picture of her on the screen, a severe corporate headshot. The anchor's voice filled the room. Evelyn Hart, the iron-willed CEO of Hartwell Enterprises, has seen stock prices soar after her aggressive restructuring of the recently acquired St. Jude's Hospital network. Daniel looked from the TV to the woman who had brought him coffee and sat with him through the longest nights of his life. The connection clicked into place with sickening clarity. Hartwell Enterprises, the company that owned St. Jude's, the company that owned Pulmo Clear. The woman who had saved his daughter was also the architect of the very system that had nearly condemned her. The warmth in his eyes, which had been a small comfort to her, flickered and died, replaced by a cold, deep hurt. "You," he whispered, the single word filled with accusation and betrayal. He stood up, putting distance between them. "This whole time, you knew. The price of that drug, the nurses being so overworked, that was you." Evelyn didn't flinch. She had been dreading this moment. She didn't make excuses. She owed him the unvarnished truth. "Yes," she said, her gaze steady, her heart pounding. "That was me, the person who set that price, who ordered those cuts. I was that person. I saw people as numbers, and I was proud of how well I could make them add up. But watching you, seeing what you were willing to do for Lily, it showed me the answer I'd gotten was wrong. It showed me the person I'd become." She told him everything, about the boardroom, her ambition, her cold philosophy, and then she told him what she was going to do about it. Her actions spoke far louder than her words. The next week, St. Jude's announced it was reversing all recent layoffs and actively recruiting more nurses, with a signing bonus. 2 weeks later, Hartwell Enterprises held a press conference. Evelyn stood at the podium and announced the formation of a multi-million-dollar fund to cover the costs of their life-saving drugs for uninsured and underinsured patients. And then, the biggest news of all, she announced they were slashing the price of Pulmo Clear by 75%, calling its previous cost a catastrophic moral failure on her part. Daniel saw the news, but more than that, he saw the change in Evelyn. Forgiveness didn't come in a single moment, but slowly, as he watched her dismantle the cold empire she had built and start building something new. Their connection, forged in the crucible of crisis, deepened into a profound respect, then a tentative friendship, and then, quietly and unexpectedly, into something that looked a lot like hope. Conclusion. Months later, the autumn sun cast a golden glow across a city park. A little girl with a wild mane of curly hair, vibrant and healthy, chased a bright yellow kite, her laughter floating on the crisp air like music. Watching from a nearby bench were a man with calloused, capable hands and a woman with a quiet, genuine smile. They weren't a CEO and a carpenter anymore. They weren't a benefactor and a recipient. They were just Evelyn and Daniel, a family, pieced together by a chance encounter in a hospital hallway, watching their daughter learn to fly. Evelyn learned that day, and in all the days that followed, that the most important numbers in life are never found on a spreadsheet. They're the beats of a child's recovering heart, the number of jobs a father will work to protect his family, and the single, transformative moment that can strip you of everything you thought you were, only to teach you how to be human again. If you are moved by this story and believe in the power of second chances, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more heartwarming stories, and share it with someone who might need a reminder that one person's kindness can truly change the world.